Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's Making Sense of It All. I'm your host, Jesse Stakes. Today, we're talking about CRA. Well, Jesse, what's CRA and why should it mean anything to me? Well, in order to understand where we are, I believe that it's important to understand why and how we arrived here in the first place. CRA followed similar laws passed to reduce discrimination in the credit and housing markets, including the Fair Housing Act of 1968, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974, and the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act of 1975. The Fair Housing Act and Equal Credit Opportunity Act prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, sex, and other personal characteristics. The Home Mortgage Disclosure Act requires that financial institutions publicly disclose mortgage lending and application data. CRA, which actually stands for the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977, encourages certain insured depository institutions to help meet the credit needs of the community in which they are chartered, including low to moderate income neighborhoods. Well, my guest this week is Kristin Couch. She's the Vice President in charge of the CRA Program for United Community Bank, headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina. She's going to go way beyond just giving you a history lesson and defining a piece of legislation. She's going to talk to you about how it works in the real world. The fact that CRA officers exist in most, if not all, banks is proof of how serious banking is taking this and how they are engaged in the community since the passing of the legislation in 1977. Enjoy the conversation, and I hope you learn a little bit more about how our federal banking system tries to encourage all banks to bring services to all people. Let's jump into it. So let me start right there with my audience. Can you tell them what CRA means?
Yeah, CRA stands for Community Reinvestment Act. The bank is required to meet the needs of the communities in which we serve, including low to moderate income individuals. So we make sure we're lending, investing, and serving our communities in which we are in.
Very cool. So layman's terms, I mean, that's a great definition, but so for the audience, what does that mean to them?
Yeah, that just means that we are making sure that we're lending, we're offering loans and providing loans to everyone. Everyone is included. We're not trying to discriminate or avoid certain areas or neighborhoods or individuals. We want to make sure lending is available for all. We are serving our communities, whether that's lenders sitting on board positions, people going to serve at their church, nursing homes, in community organizations such as Habitat for Humanity, the United Way. So we're doing our service that way. We're also providing service products such as our banking, online banking, our ATMs, our branches within our communities, and then investing. So those could be your donations, or those could be your low-income housing tax credit donation or investment.
Very cool. People don't always get to see the passionate side of banking or the caring side of banking. They usually think about it as just, loans, deposits, and kind of a cold gray building essentially. But banks really do a lot for their communities.
Yes, we do. And it is really interesting. I've been able to participate in a career day at a local high school recently and was able to talk to some students. Typically, you do think of the teller, the frontline employee who can open your accounts and stuff like that. And so there is a whole back office. There's people that are really just rooting for the community and trying to be involved in the community. And it is really nice to be a part of that. We have our compliance, which makes sure that we are following the rules and regulations of what the examiners have set forth. And so those rules help us make sure we're not discriminating or avoiding, which is what they call redlining. We're being inclusive to all. We want to help the whole entire communities in which we're in.
Very cool. I want to dive further into it, but first I'd like to take a step back and learn a little bit more about you. Kristin, how did you get started in banking in the first place?
Well, I never wanted to be in banking. Banking pretty much found me. I started in college as a teller part-time during the summer and at during the winter fall break. My mom actually, when I was born, was in banking, and she
Okay.
had a commercial lender who she worked for, and he had recently moved banks, and he was working at this bank, and she just walked in one day and was like, "Are y'all hiring summer interns? Like, my daughter needs a job." And so that's kind of how I got my start in banking. And then after that, I graduated in 2009 from the University of South Carolina Upstate campus with a communications degree.
Okay.
And
So
2009,
I don't mean to interrupt you, but what did you want to be? What was the original intent?
yeah, so I really wanted to be in marketing or do interior design. I love to decorate and but that was kind of like what I was thinking. And unfortunately in 2009 it was really hard to find jobs.
Sure.
I actually did have a job prior to my banking or full-time banking career, and that did not last long. It was with a territory sales representative company. They wanted me to go into big companies without appointments, and that was just not something that I felt comfortable with. I thought it was very disrespectful just to walk in without a appointment set. And my dad gave me some really great wisdom that I was not able to quit my job unless I had another job. And so at that time, the doors were open for a full-time teller position at that bank that I had worked for, and I just went back there and worked full time. And yeah, worked there for 4 years and kind of went back into our operations department. I did not want, I tried to apply for different teller jobs or different banking jobs and other jobs throughout the years that I was a
Sure.
teller. And it was really hard to find a job because everybody was, requiring 3 to 5 years experience. Well, how do you get experience if you don't have any?
It's a great question. I think that people don't ask enough when somebody throws that roadblock in their way.
Yeah, so we had a lady in operations come visit one day, and she said that she was so swamped. And so I kept telling her, I want to do it. I want to be busy. Like, can I apply for a job? And they opened a position, and I was fortunate enough to get that position in our deposit operations and worked really hard and got promoted into compliance. And so that was really kind of how my start in compliance and taking off. So
And so that's what the CRA part of banking, that really is part of compliance. Yes, it's part of that. It's part of the requirements from a federal government and state government standpoint that banks have to adhere to in order to keep their charter, in order to serve the community in which they work.
yeah, if we don't comply with the CRA regulation, then we can, be prohibited from opening new branches and then acquiring or merging. We are rated. There's a rating scale, so you can get outstanding, which is like the top of the top. You have high satisfactory, needs improvement, and non-compliance. And so, as a bank, we strive to get outstanding in our ratings because that allows us to continue to branch and be in the communities and get more branch or banks or buy more banks or merge and acquire. So I mean, if we have a poor CRA ratings, then that can really hurt us.
Sure. Well, you have a responsibility to the community to take care of the people in which you're asking to serve them. Let me ask you this. I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have a favorite project or a favorite example of CRA and how it's impacted a community in a good way that really just sticks in your mind, or it really just kind of pulls at your heartstrings?
Yeah. So one of the things that we are kind of challenged to do is community development lending. So community
Okay.
development lending is lending outside of kind of businesses that are less than $1 million in gross annual revenues. So it's kind of, and they're larger loans, so your big impact loans. So seeing some of those loans, maybe, for example, to a Habitat for Humanity, seeing for them to help build affordable housing. Or there's been some community development loans to anchor stores in rural areas. So to your Dollar Generals, Dollar Generals are everywhere, and mostly they're in the rural communities. because there's not big, huge supermarkets or your Walmarts out there. And so making loans to organizations that help people have access to food, have access to resources. We have a lot of community development loans to organizations that help homeless people or people who are going through drug and alcohol rehabilitation. Like those are so impactful because you know that the money is going to help somebody.
No doubt. Well, and again, I mean, I know I said it earlier, but I don't think that customers of the bank nor the people in the community really understand how much banks do to support the efforts of nonprofits and of other organizations, to your point, that help with drug rehabilitation or that help with housing. Your point of access to food, I've learned it recently through other community organizations, how much of a difficulty that is, not just for agricultural centers, like ironically where the food comes from, but in these rural and urban centers, grocery stores don't want to be there. And so for us to be able to help them or incentivize them to feed those people, I think it's tremendous. And I think it's one of those things that it goes unheralded for banks, but it is a way that we give back all the time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it is really, the bank has a foundation called, and then they have a council called the Together for Good Council. And it has been so impactful just to see what these group of bankers are challenged to do. And they're challenged to sit on this council and find ways to donate and serve in the community for specific days that the bank has designated. And all of those, the 5 days that they have picked, are really things that our employees are passionate about. So you've got World Animal Day, then you have National Day of Service, Financial Literacy Month, Martin Luther King Day. Those days are geared towards our employees to really focus about like our efforts and how can we serve our police officers. And so there's been a lot of conversations. I sit on the council just as a listening ear that they've had. And we had one instance during National Day of Service where one of the employees shared, they went to a fire department and they said, we want to provide you food for the day or something, or we gave you a basket. And the firefighter was like, now this is many years after 9/11. And he was like, nobody has ever done anything for us. And that just gives you goosebumps because, you're making a huge difference in this fire department. They serve us. They are there to help protect our community. And to be able to give back to those people who give so much to the community means so much.
No doubt. And you're not talking about a loan. You're not talking about a bank account. You're just talking about a thank you. And you're talking about just something that's just kindness.
Yes, for sure.
Tell me this, as far as we've talked a little bit about how CRA benefits the community, but there are certain requirements that, to your point, with if you're in a county or if you're doing work in a certain county, there's certain requirements that a bank has to adhere to from the federal government. Can you talk a little bit about that for my audience?
Yeah, so banks are required to lend and donate and serve, all of those things. But you also have to, we take the demographic data. So we have a CRA task force that the bank has created last year when our chief compliance officer, Ron Cox, came on. He thought to take a holistic approach of all of our metro statistical areas. So the communities that we are in, those kind of flow up to a metro statistical area or MSA. And we designate certain counties where our banks are at.
Okay.
And so that's kind of like so you'll take, for example, the Greenville MSA is made up of 4 different counties, and we have banks in all of those counties. And then we are required to meet targets within those counties as far as lending goes. Typically that's, investments into our services kind of are making sure there's not really a set number.
Right.
It's kind of fluid, and it's just based on what your peers are doing and your bank size. So there's different banks. We obviously know we have really small community banks with certain revenues. You have your mid-sized banks, and then you have your large banks, and then you have your extremely large banks like your, Truist and TDs and all those. And each, level, there's different tiers kind of on what is expected. And so we need to make sure that we are meeting the same trying to be aligned with our peers. We have targets in place on how much percentage that we want to be within our peers and what they're doing in lending. The one thing that's really difficult for CRA is we are compared to all lenders. So we're compared to all banks, all credit unions, all of your mortgage or non-traditional banks, so your mortgage companies. So that makes it really difficult because they can offer different products and services that, we might not be able to offer.
Sure.
So we try to make sure we're offering things that are, in comparison to those mortgage companies, but it's not always easy. They're not regulated as the same way as banks are.
No doubt.
Now,
they are much more loosely regulated. Absolutely.
Loosely regulated. Now, the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they have since changed directions and are now including them in any kind of cease and desist orders or consent orders that they may have, which is good because it's not fair for a bank to have certain rules placed on them and then these mortgage companies be able to be a little bit more flexible. So making sure that things are the same. And so we just want to make sure we have targets in place. And if there's, certain areas that we're not meeting those targets, we have this task force that kind of comes up with different ways. So whether that's marketing, whether that's a new investment, whether that's adding a ITM machine to be available in certain tracks that we can broaden our search and broaden our footprint to individuals and make banking available. We've also created a bank on certified product for individuals who are unbanked to make sure that we have banking available for all.
Well, and I think, what it goes to show, and I think that a lot of the times people think that banks are in place only for certain people, or that that banks really only want to do business with, with a certain income level of people. But the truth of the matter is that banks really are community organizations, and they're there to serve the community that they're in. And I think that CRA just ensures that. It makes sure that banks are, if nothing else, if you want to call it a regulation, then fair enough. But essentially it's saying, here's a blueprint to follow. Here's how you make sure that you serve your whole community, not just part of your community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they want to make sure everything is available for everybody. Which is great.
No doubt. I think it's great. I think it's great. I think it's great to kind of share this because it's something that the audience doesn't always get to see. If people are interested in learning more about CRA requirements in their community, is there a resource that they could tap into? Is there something they could find?
Yeah, if you go on to, we are regulated by the FDIC. You're more than welcome to go on there and pull up the regulation itself and kind of read it. If a good quick Google search, you can search anywhere. They have free webinars and stuff on CRA. If anybody wants to call and chat and just talk about it, I'm happy to talk about CRA. I know every bank has a CRA officer. And so if you want to go to your own bank and just talk about, what your bank is doing in the community, there's many resources out there.
And I'm jealous. It sounds like you have a fun job in banking.
You do have a fun job in banking. There is a lot of data work on the back end of it too. And really, we have an examination coming up. So for CRA, you're examined every 3 years, and our exam's coming, soon, and by the end of this year. And so that's going to be a stress point because you can always try your hardest to lend in the areas and serve in the areas that isn't enough, since there's really no set definition on how many loans you have to have, how much money you have to invest. It's kind of a gray area, but it's still a great job, and it's good that banks are required to do this and to meet the needs of the community.
No doubt. I couldn't agree with you more. There's so many variables when it comes to lending money that it's not like you can answer everything before you actually have the situation actually presented to you and in front of you, because you still have to make good loans as a bank. Because if you made poor decisions with your institution's money, you wouldn't be around for very long.
No, that is true. And one of the things in the CRA regulation, it states, meeting the needs of the community, but with the safety and soundness aspect of it. I mean, if someone doesn't unfortunately qualify, you can't make bad loans. You need to make sure that you are making safe banking practices.
No doubt. I couldn't agree with you more. I really appreciate you joining me. I'd look forward to having you on again sometime soon, hopefully, to kind of pick your brain about other topics.
Yeah, that would sound great. Thanks.
For CRA to work as it's intended, it needs to be a moving target. And for the most part, it has been since 1977. I'm not going to go into all the details, but there have been legislative changes to CRA in 1989, 1991, 92, 94, 95, 99, 2005, 2007, 2008, and we currently have additional proposed changes that are under consideration from Congress. If we as a society have learned anything in today's world, it's that the only constant that we have is change. Well, that's going to wrap me up for today. I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Kristin, and if you would like to see more issues explored like this, reach out and let me know. I'll catch you guys next time.